Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. What you're about to read isn't just celebrity drama. It is a full-scale, slow, burning explosion. An emotional earthquake that shook a live studio audience and left millions of viewers stunned. This content is for entertainment purposes only, but make no mistake. The intensity, the escalation, the sheer shock of what unfolded makes it feel like a moment ripped straight from the most gripping political thriller. Except this wasn't fiction. This was Leonardo DiCaprio, Hollywood's most recognizable environmental crusader, walking straight into the most unexpected, most brutal character dismantling ever seen on daytime television. Imagine this: an Oscar-winning actor, a global activist, a man whose public image has been carefully built over decades, steps into what he believes will be a friendly, supportive interview. He expects smiles, softball questions, applause, the usual morning show warmth. But what he gets instead is a meticulously planned ambush so harsh, so unrelenting, that by the end of the 20-minute ordeal, even the camera operators were reportedly frozen in place, unsure whether to keep filming or look away. This wasn't a clash of opinions. It wasn't even a heated debate. This was a demolition, calculated, timed, and unleashed with chilling precision. And at the center of it all, Behar. The studio atmosphere that morning seemed perfectly ordinary. The view's iconic set glowed under the bright, familiar lighting that gave everything a soft golden tint. Audience members chatted excitedly as they found their seats, their voices buzzing with the typical Tuesday morning energy. They expected celebrity chatter, political banter, thoughtful commentary, just another episode in a long, running daytime tradition. No one in those seats had the slightest idea they were minutes away from witnessing a cultural earthquake. The moment Leonardo DiCaprio walked onto the stage, the room erupted into applause. He wore a tailored navy suit with an open, collar white shirt, a polished yet relaxed look that fit effortlessly with his public persona. He flashed that world-famous smile, the one instantly recognizable from red carpets and award stages. He shook hands with the hosts, waved at fans, and took his seat with the easy, practiced confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times. Why wouldn't he feel comfortable? He was there to talk about his passion, the environment. His latest documentary, which had already generated buzz on the festival circuit, had consumed 3 relentless years of his life. He had trekked across continents, from melting glaciers in Greenland to fire-scarred Amazonian jungles to African communities battling unprecedented drought. He had worked side by side with scientists, activists, and indigenous leaders to build what early reviewers were calling the most comprehensive climate documentary ever produced. To him, this conversation was not a burden. It was a mission. As the interview began, everything seemed normal. Whoopi Goldberg welcomed him warmly, praising both his environmental advocacy and his recent acting work. Sarah Haynes leaned in with genuine curiosity, asking about the physical demands of filming in extreme climates. Alyssa Farah Griffin brought up some of the documentary's most powerful scenes, complimenting its emotional impact. The audience laughed, nodded, applauded. It was smooth, it was pleasant, it was everything DiCaprio expected. But there was one person on that panel who had remained conspicuously quiet: Behar. Those who truly knew her colleagues, longtime viewers, producers, recognized the signs. She wasn't sipping her coffee. She wasn't throwing in small jokes or witty commentary. Instead, she sat unusually still, hands resting on the table, a thin, fixed smile curving her lips. Her eyes followed DiCaprio's every gesture with a level of intensity that didn't match the light, breezy tone of the interview. Laid out before her were pages of notes, arranged not casually but deliberately, like a series of loaded weapons waiting to be fired. What Leonardo didn't know was that Joy had spent the previous night preparing with almost obsessive focus. She wasn't looking to highlight his documentary. She wasn't interested in celebrating his activism. Instead, she had compiled a detailed dossier of what she considered the actor's environmental contradictions, his private jet travel, his real estate holdings, his business partnerships. She had researched his investments, dug through public records, and crafted a series of questions not meant to elicit answers, but to trigger reactions. The opening pleasantries weren't friendliness. They were bait, and DiCaprio, earnest and trusting in his mission, stepped right into the trap. Then it happened. The shift, so sudden, so jarring, It was later described by crew members as a temperature drop in the room. Joy leaned forward, her smirk widening almost imperceptibly, like the first crack splintering across a sheet of ice. For a second, even the audience sensed it. Something electric, something dangerous, something about to ignite. Camera operators would later say they felt the moment through their viewfinders. So, Leo, Joy began, drawing out his name with a tone that dripped with disdain. It was the kind of voice that stops conversations, that makes even seasoned interview guests recoil, that signals the beginning of a verbal ambush so intense it will leave its target breathless. Every head at the table turned toward her. Every eye in the studio locked onto the exchange, and in that one stretch, without syllable, Leonardo DiCaprio's calm, carefully cultivated composure began to fracture, piece by piece, setting the stage for what would become the most explosive confrontation in talk show history. Joy leaned forward in her chair, her tone dripping with a slow, deliberate condescension. So, she began, drawing out the syllables as if she wanted every person in the studio to feel the weight of her judgment. "You're here talking about climate change. Again." She paused, letting the final word hover in the air, like an accusation wrapped in politeness. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge, a provocation, a spark tossed onto dry grass. "Tell me." She continued, cocking her head slightly, her expression sharpening. "How many private jets did you take to get here today?" The studio audience, which had moments earlier been buzzing with cheerful excitement, fell silent in an instant. The energy drained from the room as if someone had flipped a switch. Leonardo DiCaprio blinked once, his eyebrows briefly lifting in surprise. The expression was fleeting, but unmistakable. He had walked in expecting questions about the scientific urgency laid out in his latest documentary, perhaps inquiries about the researchers he'd spent months interviewing, or discussions about policy solutions. But this was something entirely different. This was an ambush wrapped in daytime TV charm, actually joy. He replied, keeping his voice steady and measured even as the muscle in his jaw tightened. "I drove here from my hotel. I've been very conscious about reducing my carbon footprint, which is exactly why I'm here today to discuss." "Oh, please." Joy interrupted, slicing through his sentence with a dismissive wave of her hand. The gesture wasn't large, but it carried the kind of casual cruelty that suggests the other person's words weren't merely unimportant. They were irrelevant. "Spare us the rehearsed talking points. You lecture the rest of the world about carbon emissions while you're out yachting around the Mediterranean with supermodels." She raised an eyebrow. "Don't you think that's just a tiny bit hypocritical?" The word hypocritical landed with the sharpness of a slap. The other host shifted uncomfortably. Whoopi Goldberg's gaze darted between Joy and DiCaprio, her expression a mix of warning and weary resignation. She'd been at the table long enough to know when a segment was spiraling out of control. Sarah Haynes sank a little into her seat, biting her lip as if willing the confrontation to deflate. Alyssa Farah Griffin's polite smile froze in place, brittle as glass. The audience, sensing the atmospheric shift, quieted further. It was the silence that only emerges when people realize that the pleasant celebrity interview they expected is gone, replaced by something volatile and unpredictable. DiCaprio straightened in his chair, his shoulders lifting, posture tightening, the transition from relaxed guest to cornered advocate happening in real time. When he spoke again, his tone was still calm, but there was a fresh edge to it, a steeliness behind the diplomacy. The first visible crack in his carefully maintained composure. "Joy," he said evenly, "I think you're conflating personal choices with systemic advocacy. Yes, I've made mistakes in the past. I've acknowledged them publicly, but I've also donated over $100 million to environmental causes. I've changed my lifestyle. I've $100 million. Joy cut in, loudly and with theatrical disbelief. She leaned back, almost laughing. "That's pocket change for someone worth $300 million. What percentage of your wealth is that really?" She grimaced mockingly. "Oh no, not even half. Let's not pretend you've given up everything for the planet." She didn't wait for him to respond before continuing her attack. "And don't even get me started on that foundation of yours. How much of that money actually goes to the environment? And how much gets eaten up by administrative costs, PR firms, media consultants, awareness campaigns, staff retreats?" Each phrase was pronounced with sharper disdain than the last. DiCaprio's hands, previously resting calmly on the armrests, closed around them slowly. His knuckles turned white. His expression shifted, still polite, still controlled, but unmistakably colder. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice dropping a register. It wasn't loud, but it carried a warning, the kind of tone that signaled the beginning of a storm. "Are you questioning the legitimacy of my foundation?" A ripple passed through the audience. "Because if you are," he continued, every word crisp and deliberate, "I can provide you with detailed, publicly verifiable financial reports showing exactly where every single dollar goes. Nothing is hidden. Nothing is misrepresented." Joy smiled, not warmly, but the calculated smile of someone who had maneuvered a chess piece precisely where she wanted it. She settled back in her chair, her expression triumphant, almost satisfied. "Oh, I'm sure you can provide reports," she said lightly. "Hollywood accounting is famous for making numbers say whatever you need them to say. You know that better than anyone, just like you've managed to make yourself look like an environmental hero while burning through fossil fuels faster than most small countries." A few audience members gasped. The other hosts froze completely. Joy wasn't done. "You preach lifestyle changes to working Americans," she added, her voice sharpening further, "while you live a life of excess that the average person can't even dream of. You tell people to eat less meat and drive less while you fly across continents, vacation in exclusive resorts, and attend climate conferences hosted in luxury locations." DiCaprio inhaled slowly, visibly restraining the urge to snap back. His eyes narrowed just slightly. "I advocate for systemic change," he said, quieter now but firmer. "Government regulation, global cooperation, innovation, passing meaningful legislation. And yes, I've adjusted my own behavior. I don't need to live a monastic life to fight for something bigger than myself." Joy raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "So your message is, do as I say, not as I do." The tension in the room had fully crystallized. What had started as a promotional interview had turned into a public trial, a moral interrogation in front of a live audience. The studio audience gasped, a sharp collective inhale that sliced through the air like a sudden wind. A few people in the front row actually recoiled, sinking into their seats, as if trying to distance themselves from the destructive force unfolding before them. This wasn't playful banter. It wasn't spirited debate. It wasn't even a heated exchange. This was character assassination in real time, raw, brutal, and unfiltered. Sarah Haynes, sensing the spiraling danger, attempted to interject with a harmless question about the documentary's cinematography. Her voice, usually bright and steady, wavered. She was trying to drag the conversation back to safe, neutral territory, but Joy wasn't having it. She wasn't even aware of Sarah's attempt. She was locked in, laser-focused, relentless, and fully committed to dismantling Leonardo DiCaprio's credibility piece by piece. "You know what really bothers me about celebrities like you," Joy said, turning toward DiCaprio with deliberate slowness. She lifted her pen and pointed it directly at him, not casually, but with the intent of a prosecutor selecting the moment to strike. The pen became a weapon, an accusatory spear disguised as an office supply. "You think because you played someone important in a movie, that somehow makes you an expert on everything." A murmur rippled through the studio. DiCaprio's face tightened, the muscles in his jaw clenching almost imperceptibly. Joy pressed on, her voice sharpening. "You dropped out of high school, Leo. High school. What exactly qualifies you to lecture world leaders about climate policy?" Silence slammed down like a curtain. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, their mechanical hum dimming under the weight of the moment. The air crackled, literally crackled, with tension. It felt solid, heavy, almost dangerous. You could cut it with a knife, or perhaps with Joy's pen, which she held poised like a blade. DiCaprio's famous smile had completely vanished, his lips pressed together, teeth grinding slightly behind them. The hint of red creeping along his cheekbones signaled what longtime viewers knew they were witnessing, the first cracks in Leonardo DiCaprio's legendary composure. "Education comes in many forms, Joy." His voice remained level, but the controlled steel beneath it was unmistakable. "I've spent the last 15 years working directly with scientists, researchers, and policy experts. I've visited melting glaciers, Deforested regions, drought-stricken communities. I've spoken to people whose entire lives have been upended by climate change. He paused, eyes narrowing. Have you? The audience reacted. A soft ooh, swelling like a wave. It was a strong counterattack, professional, measured, simmering just below the boiling point. But Joy had been waiting, counting the seconds, for him to push back. She leaned forward. I don't need to visit glaciers to know when someone's being a hypocrite. Her voice rose, sharper, louder, designed to dominate the room. And I certainly don't need lectures from someone who thinks private jet travel is justified as long as you buy carbon offsets afterward. She jabbed the pen again, each movement like a verbal stab. That's like saying it's okay to punch someone as long as you apologize later. That's a completely false equivalency. DiCaprio shot back, his tone rising for the first time. His calm was evaporating, replaced by a raw, urgent frustration. Carbon offsets, when done correctly, do make a measurable difference. The projects I support have removed thousands of tons of carbon from the atmosphere. Joy rolled her eyes with theatrical exaggeration, tilting her head back so dramatically that even the farthest audience members could see the full arc of contempt. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't passive. It was designed to embarrass, to diminish, to mock. Oh, please, she scoffed. Carbon offsets are just a way for rich people to buy their way out of guilt. It's medieval indulgences all over again. Pay a fee and poof, your sins are forgiven. A few audience members gasped. Others shifted, uncomfortable. Joy wasn't finished. Meanwhile, regular people have to choose between heating their homes and buying groceries because of the energy policies people like you push. The accusation hit the room like a gunshot, sharp, smoky, and echoing. Joy had reframed the entire narrative in one strike. Leonardo DiCaprio wasn't a hero. He wasn't a passionate advocate. He was, in her framing, an out-of-touch elitist whose activism harmed the very people he claimed to protect. And DiCaprio felt it, deeply. He leaned forward, eyes blazing with the first unmistakable flash of genuine anger. People like me. His voice had developed a dangerous edge, low, hot, simmering with restrained fury. What exactly do you mean by that, Joy? Joy didn't hesitate. She didn't blink. She didn't soften for a single heartbeat. I mean wealthy Hollywood elites who are completely disconnected from how real people live. You live in a bubble of yes, men and private islands. When gas prices go up, you don't feel it. When electricity rates spike, it doesn't affect your lifestyle. Not one bit. The studio was frozen. No one dared move. The battle lines were carved deep into the floor now. Joy had framed herself as the voice of ordinary Americans, and DiCaprio, she had cast him as the villain in his own story, the rich, insulated celebrity who dared to lecture hardworking people on morality. You're absolutely wrong, DiCaprio said, and this time the anger was unmistakable, slipping past his Hollywood polish. I grew up in Los Angeles. My mother was a single parent. I do know what it's like to worry about bills, and that's exactly why I care about creating sustainable solutions that benefit everyone, not just the wealthy. Joy laughed. But it wasn't a laugh. It was a hard, jagged sound, like glass shattering in slow motion. Cruel, mocking, designed to wound. Oh, spare me the sob story, she snapped. You haven't worried about a bill in 30 years. Don't sit there pretending you understand the struggles of working families when you spend more on a single vacation than most people make in their entire lives. That was the moment. The moment everyone, from the hosts to the audience to the crew, would later agree was the breaking point. The exact second Leonardo DiCaprio's mask finally began to crack for real. A flush of deep red crawled up his neck. His breath quickened. His eyes widened in disbelief, outrage, and something dangerously close to fury. His carefully styled hair fell slightly across his forehead as he exhaled sharply through his nose, trying to steady himself. This, DiCaprio said, his voice trembling with barely contained fury, is exactly the problem with political discourse today. Each word came out tight, clipped, as though he were forcing them past clenched teeth. Instead of discussing actual solutions, you're more interested in personal attacks and character assassination. Character assassination. Joy repeated, her voice pitching upward in a tone of theatrical astonishment. She lifted her hands in an exaggerated display of innocence, her eyebrows raised high, as if she couldn't imagine why he'd say such a thing. I'm just asking the questions your fawning fans and the media are too starstruck to ask. If you can't handle basic scrutiny about your lifestyle choices, maybe you shouldn't be positioning yourself as a moral authority on environmental issues. Basic scrutiny, DiCaprio repeated, incredulous. His eyes widened, emotion flashing across his face. You've done nothing but attack me personally from the moment I sat down. You haven't asked a single question about the documentary, the science, the policy proposals, nothing. Joy shrugged with deliberately exaggerated innocence, her expression blank and patronizing. I'm asking about your credibility, Leo. If you're going to be the face of environmentalism, don't people deserve to know whether you actually practice what you preach? The studio audience held its collective breath. The other hosts sat frozen, each one unsure whether to intervene or let this televised explosion continue unfolding. Whoopi's hand hovered near her stack of cards, but her mouth remained slightly open, unable to form a sentence. The audience members glanced around at each other, eyes wide, realizing they were witnessing something massive, something that would dominate headlines, but not yet knowing how massive. And then Leonardo DiCaprio stood up. The movement was so abrupt, so charged, that the hosts visibly flinched. Joy's triumphant smile faltered for a split second, surprise flickering across her face, before she regained control, her expression sliding back into satisfied superiority. Camera operators scrambled, adjusting their frames. Producers shouted silently behind the glass. Security guards along the studio wall straightened, their posture shifting into alertness. DiCaprio towered over the table, chest rising and falling, his hands clenched into tight fists at his sides. The transformation from calm advocate to enraged accuser was instantaneous and electrifying. You know what, Joy, he said, each word enunciated with surgical precision, dripping with controlled rage. I came here in good faith to discuss serious environmental issues that affect every human being on this planet. Issues that will determine whether our children and grandchildren inherit a world they can actually live in. And all you've done is throw personal attacks. Joy remained seated, her satisfied smile returning, now wider than before. She was savoring this. She was getting precisely what she wanted. Leonardo DiCaprio losing his composure on national television. Oh, so now you're going to storm off? Joy asked, her voice thick with mockery. Very mature, Leo. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle being challenged. Challenged? DiCaprio roared, his voice booming louder than anyone had ever heard from him. The sound engineers jolted in their seats. You call this a challenge? You haven't presented a single fact, not one counter-argument, not one alternative solution. All you've done is try to tear me down personally because you don't like environmental policy. The studio lights seemed to grow hotter, brighter. The air felt heavy, charged. Every person in the room understood they were witnessing a moment that would be replayed, analyzed, and memed for years. Sit down, Leonardo, Joy commanded, her voice icy, condescending, dripping with the satisfaction of someone who believes she has complete control. You're embarrassing yourself on national television. I'm embarrassing myself. DiCaprio laughed, a sharp, humorless sound, half disbelief, half fury. He remained standing, posture rigid, eyes blazing. His charming Hollywood persona evaporated, replaced by something raw and unfiltered. You're the one who turned what should have been a serious discussion about the planet's future into a cheap tabloid-style ambush. Whoopi finally found her voice. Leo, please, let's just know. DiCaprio snapped, cutting her off. Oh no, Whoopi. His eyes never left Joy, locked onto her like a missile tracking a target. I want to hear more of Joy's brilliant insights. Please, Joyan, lighten us all. What's your solution to climate change? What's your plan for the millions who will be displaced by rising sea levels? What's your answer for the communities already being devastated by extreme weather? Joy leaned back as though settling comfortably into victory. Her smile had shifted from amused to predatory. She was relishing every second of his unraveling. My solution, she said sweetly. Simple. Stop listening to hypocritical celebrities and start listening to scientists who don't have massive financial conflicts of interest. Financial conflicts of interest. DiCaprio's voice climbed another octave, cracking slightly from the strain of shouting. What financial conflicts are you talking about? I've invested my own money into renewable energy, sustainable technology, conservation work, if anything. I lose money by advocating for environmental causes. Oh, please. Joy scoffed, waving a dismissive hand as though swatting away an annoying insect. Your investments make you look good while padding your portfolio. You profit off the same fear you preach. The audience gasped. The hosts froze. Joy wasn't just poking the bear anymore. She was dragging it into the spotlight and daring it to roar louder.